In 1921, Arthur Waley translates a 14th-century Japanese play for English readers and encounters a problem that will haunt translators for the next century. The play, Hagoromo, tells of a celestial being who descends to earth, removes her feathered robe to bathe, and becomes trapped when a fisherman steals it. Waley calls her an angel. Other translators choose fairy, nymph, or simply leave the word Tennin untranslated. None of these choices are wrong. All of them are catastrophically incomplete. Because the being in question, eyes lined with kohl, breasts bare, a five-colored scarf trailing from her shoulders like captured wind, looks nothing like the angels Waley's readers picture. Yet the Japanese word for her, tianshi, reads tenshi, heaven messenger. The exact characters Chinese Christians use for angel in their Bibles. Stand in Tokyo today and ask someone what tenshi means, and they'll describe something with wings and a halo. Show them a 12th century painting of a Tennin, and they'll stare at a half-naked woman playing a lute mid-flight, scarves defying physics, no wings in sight. Something transformed as it traveled. This is the story of that transformation, and of the single piece of clothing that holds the answer. The trail begins not in Japan, but in the monsoon forests of 4th century India, where Sanskrit poets describe the apsara, water spirits born from the churning of the cosmic ocean, so beautiful that their appearance causes sages to lose centuries of accumulated meditation in an instant. Temple dancers at Angkor Wat mimic their sinuous movements. Stone carvers render them in sandstone, hips cocked, jewelry elaborate, torsos unclothed. These are not modest beings. They seduce. They distract. They serve the gods as rewards for heroes and tests for holy men. The Rigveda calls them wives of the gods. The Mahabharata deploys them as divine weapons. Indra sends the Apsara Urvashi to break a rival's concentration. She succeeds. The Buddhist texts that compile in the centuries after the Buddha's death inherit these beings wholesale, rebranding them as Devata, residents of the heaven realms, companions to bodhisattvas, musicians at celestial celebrations. They gain a new role but keep their aesthetic. Bare-breasted, flower-bearing, perpetually young. When Buddhism travels the Silk Road into China during the Han Dynasty, these beings travel with it. Chinese translators face the same problem Waley will encounter 15 centuries later. Their language has no word for this. They improvise. They use Tianren, heaven person. Sometimes Tiannu, heaven woman. The Sanskrit apsara becomes a term requiring explanation, then slowly disappears from common use. But here's where art history becomes detective work. In the Mogao caves near Dunhuang, Buddhist shrines carved into cliffsides along the Silk Road, frescoes from the 5th through 10th centuries show the transformation in real time. Early murals feature figures nearly identical to Indian apsaras, topless, South Asian features, jewelry matching Gupta period Indian styles. By the 7th century, the faces have changed. Rounder, paler, distinctly Chinese. The jewelry shifts to match Tang Dynasty fashion. Yet the breasts remain bare. The scarves still flutter impossibly around their bodies. These scarves matter more than anything else. The Chinese call them yi, chanyi, wrapping raiment, or yu yi, feather robe. The second term is critical. Yi, feather robe. The murals show these scarves enabling flight, not wings, but fabric that somehow lifts its wearer. The iconography is consistent. Long ribbons of silk looping around the arms across the chest, billowing behind the figure as she soars horizontal to the ground, often carrying a lotus blossom or pipa lute. By the 9th century, Buddhism reaches Japan. The beings come too. Japanese monks studying in China bring back scrolls describing Tennin, the Japanese reading of those same characters, Tianren. The visual vocabulary transfers almost intact. Heian period Buddhist paintings show Tennin in the same horizontal flying pose, same impossible scarves. But something begins to shift. Japan in the 11th century exists in a state of aesthetic tension. Native Shinto tradition venerates kami, spirits dwelling in mountains, waterfalls, ancient trees. These kami are neither good nor evil, simply powerful, and they demand respect through ritual purity. Into this context drops Buddhism with its elaborate cosmology of 6 realms, innumerable Buddhas, and heaven-dwelling Tennin. The two traditions don't fight. They merge. Tennin become associated with sacred spaces. The 11th century Konjaku Monogatari-shu, a collection of Buddhist tales, describes Tenyo, the specifically female Tennin, descending to earth near temples, pure springs, sacred groves. Always near water. Always places already holy to Shinto kami. The stories treat Tennin less like angels and more like a special category of nature spirit who happen to live in Buddhist heaven. The Hagoromo tales emerge here. A Tenyo descends, removes her feathered robe to bathe. A human, usually male, always mortal, steals the robe and hides it. Without it, she cannot fly, cannot return to heaven. Trapped, she agrees to marry him. Years pass. She bears children. One day she discovers where he hid the robe. She puts it on. She flies away. Sometimes she takes the children. Sometimes she leaves them. She never returns. This story template appears in the No play, Hagoromo, in regional folktales collected by Heian period scholars. In medieval picture scrolls, the specific location changes. The most famous version places it at Miho no Matsubara Beach in Shizuoka, where a pine grove meets the sea. But the structure never varies. The robe is everything. It's her power, her identity, her passport between realms. Without it, a celestial being becomes just another abandoned wife. Now here's where it gets strange. This exact narrative, supernatural woman, stolen clothing, forced marriage, eventual escape, exists in Ireland, in Iceland, in Russia, in Scotland, in Inuit oral tradition. The Irish tell of selkies, seal women who shed their skins on shore to dance in human form. Hide the sealskin and she must stay. The Icelandic Volundark Vida describes swan maidens whose feather cloaks grant flight. The Russian tale of Tsar Sultan features a swan princess. The Inuit Goosewife story follows a hunter who captures a goose woman by hiding her feather skin. In each, the woman eventually finds her skin or cloak or robe. In each, she immediately leaves. Folklorists classify these as ATU 400, the swan maiden tale type. International indices catalog hundreds of variants. The scholarly debate rages. Did one story spread across Eurasia, mutating with each retelling? Or did human psychology independently generate this narrative because it encodes something universal about marriage, autonomy, and transformation? The Tennin version adds a Buddhist twist. The Hagoromo does not just enable flight. It represents detachment from samsara, the cycle of rebirth. To lose it is to become trapped in the mortal realm, subject to aging, death, and karmic consequence. The fisherman who steals it isn't just claiming a wife. He's forcing a higher being into a lower state of existence. The story becomes about spiritual imprisonment, not just domestic captivity. Medieval Japanese audiences would have understood this. Tennin dwell in Devaloka, the realm of gods, one of the 6 realms of Buddhist cosmology. It's impermanent. Even Tennin eventually die and are reborn, but it's paradise compared to human existence. The Hagoromo theft is cosmic crime, spiritual kidnapping. When the Tenyo escapes, she's not abandoning her family. She's reclaiming enlightenment. But watch what happens to her image. By the Kamakura period, 13th century, Japanese artists begin clothing their Tennin. Early examples still show bare shoulders, but fabric now drapes across the chest. By the Muromachi period, full kimono appear. 5-colored robes, elaborately patterned. The Hagoromo remains, those impossible trailing scarves, but they're now attached to the kimono rather than wrapping a nude body. The beings become more modest even as the iconography stays consistent. Edo period woodblock prints complete the transformation. Utagawa Kuniyoshi's 19th century triptychs show Tenyo as courtly beauties in elaborate dress, jewelry restrained, faces painted white in aristocratic fashion. They still carry lotus flowers, still float horizontally. The scarves still billow. But compare these to the Dunhuang murals and you'd swear they're different beings entirely. What happened? Cultural pressure, partly. As Buddhism became thoroughly Japanese, it absorbed Japanese aesthetics, and Japanese sensibilities favored covered bodies in formal contexts. But something else drives the change. Tennin were moving from temple walls to popular culture. No theater needed performers, not sculptures. Actors required costumes. The hagoromo becomes an actual stage prop, a magnificent embroidered robe the actor removes and dons. The spiritual concept becomes physical object. The no-play hagoromo crystallizes the iconography. The main character, a tenyo named Oto Hime, descends to Miho Beach. The fisherman Hakurio steals her robe. She pleads. He agrees to return it if she'll dance for him, one celestial dance as payment. She agrees. But she needs the robe to dance properly. It's part of the performance. He suspects a trick. She delivers the play's most famous line, "Doubt is for mortals. Celestial beings do not lie." He gives her the robe. She dances. The dance becomes the play's climax, highly stylized, no choreography, the hagoromo scarf manipulated to create visual metaphors for flight. And then she ascends, still dancing, disappearing into the heavens above Mount Fuji. The fisherman stands alone on the beach. She kept her word. She danced. The play ends. Medieval audiences debated whether she betrayed him or honored their contract. The ambiguity is the point. Can celestial beings deceive? Is withholding information different from lying? The hagoromo resolves the plot, but the ethical question hangs unanswered. Fast forward to 1868. The Meiji Restoration opens Japan to Western influence. Christian missionaries arrive. They need to translate angel. They choose Tianshu's Tenshi, heaven messenger. A perfectly logical choice. The kanji literally mean messenger from heaven. But it's also the word already in use for Tennin. Chaos ensues. Bible translations describe Tenshi visiting Mary. Buddhist texts describe Tenshi playing music for Amida Buddha. Christian angels have wings and bring prophecy. Buddhist Tennin have scarves and bring aesthetic bliss. They're theologically incompatible but linguistically identical. Modern Japanese speakers navigate this by context. A tenshi in a church is an angel. A tenshi in a temple is a tennin. The word carries double meaning, like crane in English. Is it a bird or construction equipment? You know from context. But Western translators still struggle. Academic texts use apsara, restoring the Sanskrit term. Popular culture uses angel, accepting the confusion. Art historians use tennin, keeping the Japanese. Fantasy novels use celestial maiden. Everyone's guessing. Meanwhile, Japanese popular culture runs with the ambiguity. Anime and manga featuring angels often draw on tennin iconography, the horizontal flight pose, the impossible scarves, the musical instruments. Studio Ghibli's films scatter tennin-adjacent spirits throughout their worlds. Haku's dragon form in Spirited Away moves like classical tennin paintings. The 2002 film, Inuyasha, Castle Beyond the Looking Glass, adapts the hagoromo theft story directly, complete with celestial maiden, stolen robe, and bittersweet ending. Video game designers mine the same tradition. The Final Fantasy series features celestial maidens as summonable entities, flowing robes, scarves that defy gravity, attacks named after Buddhist concepts. Touhou Project, a beloved Japanese game series, includes multiple tennin characters. Players worldwide encounter these beings, often unaware they're engaging with Buddhist iconography filtered through 15 centuries of artistic evolution. Here's what we're left with. A being born in Vedic India as a seductress spirit, baptized into Buddhism as a heaven dweller, transformed by Chinese artists into a flying aesthetic ideal, refined by Japanese culture into a symbol of unattainable beauty and spiritual transcendence, mistranslated as angel, borrowed by anime, recognized by no one. The hagoromo, that feathered robe, remains the through line. It's the visual marker that lets us trace one concept across 3 countries and 2 millennia. When you see those trailing scarves in a painting, you're looking at a direct descendant of those Dunhuang cave paintings, themselves descendants of Gupta period Apsara sculptures. The lineage is unbroken. The meaning has fragmented into a dozen interpretations. stand today in the Shizuoka Shrine near Miho no Matsubara Beach. A twisted pine tree marks the spot where legend says the Hagoromo theft occurred. Tourists visit. The shrine sells omamori amulets promising good fortune. The beach remains beautiful, Mount Fuji visible on clear days, exactly as no plays describe. Ask the shrine priest about the Tenyo who was trapped here. He'll tell you the story. The fisherman who stole her robe. The years of marriage. The discovery. The flight. Then he might mention the alternate version, less famous. In some tellings, the Tenyo chooses to stay. Not because she lacks the robe, but because she's grown to love the mortal realm. The impermanence. The seasons changing. The children growing. She makes her peace with samsara. That version never became a no play. There's no dramatic tension if the supernatural woman just stays. But it exists in folk tradition, a quiet counterpoint to the escape narrative. Maybe some Tennin prefer the human world. Maybe heaven gets boring after a few millennia. The Irish Selkie stories sometimes end this way too. The seal woman finds her skin but doesn't put it on. Chooses her human family. It never feels triumphant in those versions. There's always the sense of something surrendered, even in willing surrender. What does it mean to translate the untranslatable? The word Tennin points to a being with no Western equivalent. Angel imports Christian theology. Fairy suggests Shakespearean whimsy. Celestial maiden sounds like a dating sim. Each translation shapes understanding, forecloses possibilities. The Japanese term itself, heaven person, is almost aggressively neutral. A being from heaven. What kind of being? What does heaven mean here? The word doesn't say. You need context, history, the full weight of Buddhist cosmology and artistic tradition. This is why the Hagoromo matters more than the being herself. Clothing you can see. Scarves that billow in artwork you can trace through museum collections. The iconography travels even when the theology tangles. A 9th century Chinese painter, a 14th century No performer, and a 21st century anime character designer might disagree on everything about what Tennin represents spiritually. But they'll all draw those scarves the same way. Trailing, physics-defying, somehow both substantial and weightless. That scarf is a through line across centuries. A visual argument that this being, whatever else she represents, exists partly in human space and partly elsewhere. The scarf marks the boundary. It's always half in this world and half in the other, and that's what makes her flight possible. Without it, she's just another human, trapped in time, subject to loss, wearing ordinary clothes that respond to ordinary wind. The Meiji-era translators who chose Tenshi for angel weren't entirely wrong. They saw the linguistic parallel. Heaven messenger fits Gabriel as well as any Tennin. But they lost the clothing, the art, the 1,000 years of visual vocabulary that makes Tennin something stranger than angels, weirder than fairies, more specific than any English word allows. We're still figuring out what to call them. The conversation continues in museum plaques, anime subtitles, academic papers, shrine tourist pamphlets. Each generation retranslates, hoping to close the gap between what we see and what we can say. Meanwhile, the beings themselves remain unchanged in the oldest paintings and newest fan art alike, flying horizontal to the ground, scarves impossible, carrying flowers and instruments, halfway between heaven and earth, wearing the only clothing that matters, the robe that makes them free.